ladies and gentlemen, the news over the weekend has been an absolute disaster for the ANC. But before we get on to the main news stories, can I yet again ask you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and if you want to support the work I do, you can buy me a coffee. The link is in the description box below. So let's get on to it. What's happened to the ANC? So the first news is that the ANC messed up. So how did they mess up? Well, first of all, they lost their parliamentary majority, which means that a lot of the rubbish that they would usually push through, cram through, they can't. And so one of the things that was recommended during the last administration was a presidential oversight committee. This is basically an oversight committee that would hold the president accountable and review things that he had done. And the ANC during the last administration basically vetoed it. They didn't want it. Yeah, they can't do that anymore because they don't have a majority. And this was reintroduced to the House and was passed by everyone, apart from the ANC. The ANC said they didn't want it, but they don't have the votes to be able to ensure that their will gets enforced on Parliament anymore. Yeah, so the president's got his own oversight committee. Yeah, he can't just stuff money in the sofa anymore. The headline has said that the DA and the EFF had found each other and that they had both voted for this, in some kind of active union, which actually becomes really interesting because news now is that Paul Mashatile is going before the ANC's Integrity Commission. This is over the supposed corruption and fraud allegations that are being levied against him. Now, in a normal functioning democracy where the courts are not all captured, he'd go before the courts and they'd determine if there was corruption. And if there was, he'd go to jail. No, this is South Africa. You know what we do? Send him before the governing party's Integrity Commission? And they do what exactly? Do they recall him or fire him, or does he go to jail? We yet to find out. Well, anyway, he's going before their Integrity Commission, where if we've seen that what's happened in the past, everybody just goes, we'll be fine, and nothing ever gets done. That's just my view. You can let me know what you think in the comment section below. So on to some other news. The ANC says that they're not going to preempt the outcome of the US election. Whether it be Trump or Harris that wins, they say they are ready to work with whoever. Yeah, but is whoever that takes over actually going to be ready to work with you? That's what you're failing to understand. With that being said, the ANC then goes on to say that they will continue to engage whoever wins because it's in their interest to ensure that we foster relations that are good for our national interests. So when we really mess up our relationships with the West because we want to coattail to the East, Russia or China, that's in our national interests? I mean, the majority of our trade actually goes to the US. So if we're actually fostering our national interests, we'd be kissing their asses and not China and Russia's asses. But that's not what happens typically, is it? Because you see, the ANC says the reason they're doing this is to contribute towards inclusive growth, fighting poverty in our country, and creating better economic opportunities for those who are disenfranchised. Now, disenfranchised, basically, according to the ANC, means only two things, women and blacks, because that's their rhetoric. So it's inclusive growth, but mainly just for kind of like black women and some black men, because they were, previously disadvantaged. So it's not inclusive growth. It's growth that you want to see happen to your chosen demographic who you think are more likely to basically vote you back into power. Yeah, as Tony Stark once said, not a great plan. You see, because at the weekend, what we also found out is that Botswana's governing party that's been in place since the dawn of their liberation, they lost power. In fact, they came fourth. And this was unthinkable a few years ago. A few years ago, the Liberation Party that had been there for nearly 50 years, 60 years, they were going nowhere. They'd been there forever. But like the ANC, really. And they lost the election. They lost it to the UDC. Now, you may not know much about Botswana's politics, and to be frank, you have no reason to know anything about it. It's our neighbor. But what it does do is it gives you a precursor. The liberation movements aren't just going to stay there forever. Eventually, even the people that you think are going to vote for you in perpetuity are going to get fed up with your rubbish. You can only push them so far. Because you see, what UDC showed us is that this is a party that took their people for granted. These are the people that, according to them, were never going to go anywhere else. Why would they? I mean, they're in the rural areas and they always vote, the governing party. And they didn't, because you see, their lives didn't get better. and they watch their governing party get more and more corrupt and steal more. Sound familiar? Well, unfortunately, after many years, they lost control of the country and it's now gone to the UDC. And you see, what it shows us is that liberation movements aren't forever. Even the ANC is not going to be forever. You see, the ANC can't actually improve things for the country as a whole. Not just the segments of society that they think may vote for them. If they can't improve society for everyone, yeah, they've got a real problem coming their way. And it's a problem that they don't necessarily know how to fix. So what else happened at the weekend? Well, apparently some of the ANC guys are really unhappy with the government's communication information systems. This is basically their propaganda arm. And according to them, that their own propaganda arm is just like in shambles. It's so bad that according to them, the GNU is making the ANC look bad. And the government as a whole look bad. Because their propaganda arm is so bad it can't counteract any of the narratives. So the ANC is getting really upset because things are happening, but they're not getting attributed to the ANC. Now I'm reminded of one of the very first news stories that I covered. That was Paul Mashatile's corruption. Yeah, this is why things are not looking great for you. This is why people think that whenever anything must be happening that's positive, can't be the ANC. Because you see, what we are seeing is week upon week upon week, the ANC is still accused number one, is it not? We still think of the ANC as looting and being corrupt. We still see the ANC doing the type of things that we've done in the past. But then we've seen the GNU parties who are all going out and trying to fix things. In fact, there was a very famous clip on the weekend of John Steenhuisen getting into a Toyota Corolla.
Minister Steenhuisen, people are driving black German-made cars. You are driving just a Toyota Corolla.
Toyota Corolla.
But why? Why are you subjecting yourself to modesty?
Cost-saving mechanisms.
Yeah.
More money to be spent on the citizens, not on the politicians. There we go.
All right.
I think the whole thing was set up, to be honest. But a journalist asked him, why aren't you in, like a black Mercedes like all the other politicians are? And he says, well, I'm saving money. The money should be spent on the citizens. It shouldn't be spent on me. And the guy's like, you're subjecting yourself to poverty mentality. And yeah, that's a politician's kind of thing. That does happen. But with that being said, it's good optics. You put it on Twitter and it makes John look like a hero. Like I said, I actually think the whole thing was set up. But you see, the ANC doesn't have that. They're still driving around with the 60-car limos. And what's going on in Botswana isn't really helping, is it? So as I said, the ANC says they'll work with anybody who wins the US election. But they also had a meeting at the weekend, an internal mechanisms meeting, where they were basically discussing what they considered to be the deadlocks and tensions within the GNU, specifically around foreign policy. Because if you've watched any of my videos recently, you'll see the ANC, the DA aren't exactly agreeing on, are we friends with Russia or not? And now the ANC basically says, well, our foreign policy is off limits. In other words, whatever our foreign policy is, ANC, you guys are just going to have to shut up and do what we say. ANC really seems to forget. It lost the election. You have to work in a unions. I know this is hard for them to understand. But they can't just bulldoze everything through anymore. Remember the first news story? Presidential Oversight Committee? Yeah, you see, you couldn't bulldoze the veto of that either anymore. Can't just do what you want. You're not the governing party. And it's becoming interesting because the only real thing that's kind of to a degree holding the ANC in power with the DA is the threat of an EFF-MK coalition. But how long is that really going to hold? Well, you see, it's going to be very interesting to watch as time goes by. And why do I say that? Well, because let us not forget that Zuma is still trying to get his ANC membership back. He's still trying to appeal his expulsion. The contest between Ramaphosa and Zuma is not over. The contest between the great reformers and the RET people, it's not over. Maybe the rules of the game have changed. Fikile and Balula is probably now on the side of the reformers, whereas the RET faction is regrouping, and regrouping it will. So how does this really all play out for us long term? Well, to be honest, I don't really know. You can let me know what you think in the comment section below. But at the end of the day, the GNU is holding for now. There are a lot of cracks starting to appear though. ANC's corruption hasn't really gone away. In fact, their deputy president is still up for corruption charges. It's still not looking good for them. And we have seen what's happened in Botswana. So it's possible the ANC is going to find themselves with a bloody nose. It's also going to be very interesting what the Parliamentary Oversight Committee brings. But I suppose I'm going to end on a final news story. And it's a news story I really wish I wasn't actually really covering. This is actually around the gun control bill, the Gun Control Amendment Act. Now, for those of you watch anything of our news, you will notice that this was something that was raised a couple of years ago underneath the last administration. It was a piece of legislation put forward by Gun Free South Africa. It effectively wanted to strip people of their rights to own firearms for the purpose of self-defense. Yeah, and one of the most dangerous countries in the world. Yeah, let's just take people's firearms away for self-defense. Yeah, that'll solve things. Only somebody who lives in the Western Cape in a gated community, probably called Karen, only she'd come up with it. Only in this instance, her name was Adele. Anyway, the bill is being redebated now with the relevant oversight committees. And the DA have had to come out and basically say, just a reminder, we don't support this. Now, you see, what's really interesting is that in the actual notes, it highlights that the relevant parliamentary members themselves noted that the bill was deeply unpopular, and yet they still are thinking about pushing it forward. You see, this is exactly what happened with NHI. You get a really dumb bill that has a lot of pushback and there's a lot of problems with it. They pushed it forward anyway. Everybody said the bill was unconstitutional. Now it's going to be in the Constitutional Court probably until Jesus comes back. But this is exactly what they're proposing to do with firearms. And you have to ask yourself a question. Well, why are the ANC and the relevant parties there just so commie and retarded in nature that the only thing they can think of doing is stripping people away of their God-given rights? And the other question you got to ask yourself is, how come they don't really care what the electorate says, even when they claim that they do? Because by their own admission, the electorate don't want this, but somebody's pushing it. And there's always somebody doing it. And that, unfortunately, is the problem with South African politics. In any case, you can let me know what you think in the comment section below. That's pretty much it from me for now. Like I said, not a good weekend for the ANC. Lots of problems. Anyway, that's it until tomorrow. Bye.